Let's be honest. What if I told you that in ancient Rome, people did their business side by side, made eye contact, and sometimes closed a business deal, all while pooping? Yep. Welcome to the Roman toilet experience. The Roman Empire was brilliant at many things. Engineering genius, roads still lasting today, aqueducts stunning, but toilets absolute chaos. Picture this, a big cold stone room with no doors, no stalls, just a long bench with holes in it. You sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers, pants around your ankles, trying to maintain eye contact with the wall while your neighbor loudly discusses olive prices. Privacy wasn't just rare, it was considered unnecessary. Romans didn't just socialize at baths, they socialized on the toilet. Political debates, military gossip business, deals all while dropping a deuce. And wiping, enter the tersorium. It's a sponge, on a stick. One sponge. Shared. Community style. After use, you rinse it in a bucket of vinegar water and leave it for the next lucky guest. Yes, there was one sponge per latrine, sometimes two if they were feeling fancy. If Publius had a rough bean stew night, well, Marcus would be feeling that echo hours later. To be fair, the Romans thought this was efficient. After all, they were connected to a giant sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima. It was the pride of Roman infrastructure. But what they didn't advertise was that this sewer was also a highway for animals. Rats, crabs, snakes. Yes, snakes. There are real reports of people sitting down and getting bitten in places that should never be bitten. You'd go in to relieve yourself and leave with a lifelong fear of plumbing. Then there's the gas. Methane built up in those sewers could sometimes ignite. You sit, and boom, flaming butt cheeks. It wasn't just a bad day. It was divine punishment. Some Romans believed demons lived in the sewers and attacked through the toilet. Lighting incense before sitting down wasn't for the vibes, it was for spiritual protection. And we haven't even gotten to how toilets reflected your social class. That's in the next part. But believe it or not all Roman toilets were created equal. Just like everything else in Roman society, bathrooms reflected your status. The fancy public latrines in cities like Rome or Pompeii were architectural wonders for their time. Marble seating, running water beneath the holes, and even mosaics on the walls. But let's be honest, no amount of decorative tile makes pooping next to 15 other people feel classy. Now, if you were rich, you had better options. Private toilets in wealthy homes were a thing, though still rudimentary. They were often tucked near the kitchen, which seems like a bad idea. And sometimes just emptied into a pit beneath the house. That's right. You might be eating roast duck upstairs while your waste fermented below. Even more impressive. Some villas had multi-story indoor toilets. You could do your business without leaving your room. Sounds luxurious until you realize that flushing meant dumping a bucket of water and hoping gravity did its job. Let's just say plumbing pressure wasn't exactly their strength. Meanwhile, the lower classes were left to their own devices. Poor Romans might relieve themselves in pots or jars, called chamber pots, and then toss the contents into the street. The phrase, "watch your step," was more than polite advice. It was survival. Streets weren't just noisy and crowded, they were landmined. To combat the stink, the Romans actually had laws about when and how waste could be thrown out. But enforcement, that depended on whether the centurion on your block was feeling strict or sleepy. But hold up. Let's talk about the real winners of Roman bathroom culture, the bathhouse goers. You see, many public toilets were located near or inside bathhouses. So you'd go for a relaxing steam scrub yourself clean, and then on the way out stop by the latrine to unload. It was a full-service spa experience. Except the spa also included poop. In fact, some scholars argue that toilet time was part of the wellness ritual. Clean body, clean bowels. Very holistic, very moist. But this communal nature also came with some strange etiquette. For instance, no one really talked about not looking. Eye contact unclear. Small talk debatable. Farting probably unavoidable. Yet somehow it all functioned. There were even graffiti carvings inside some latrines. Think of it as ancient toilet Twitter. In one site, someone scratched, "I hope your hemorrhoids explode." Truly, the Roman spirit lives on? What about the ladies, you ask? Great question. Roman society wasn't exactly big on gender equality in bathroom matters. Some bathhouses had separate facilities, but many public toilets were unisex, or women simply didn't use them at all. If you were a Roman woman, chances are you either held it until you got home or used the find-a-bush strategy. And while we're at it, let's not forget the poor slaves. Someone had to clean those toilets. Imagine spending your days hauling buckets of vinegar water and scrubbing communal sponges, all while dodging rats' gas and whatever diseases were floating through the air. Speaking of diseases, the Romans didn't understand germ theory, but even they noticed that latrines weren't the healthiest places. Some doctors recommended avoiding public toilets altogether, especially during plagues or outbreaks. A wise move considering the sheer level of biohazard going on. Still, some Romans went all in. There were toilet gods. Yes, you read that right. Deities like Cloacina, goddess of the sewer, were worshipped to protect bathroom users from all the dangers lurking beneath their butts. People left offerings, lit incense, and even built small shrines. If your god was the spirit of flushing, your prayers were very specific. So while we tend to picture Roman life as all togas, grapes, and epic speeches, the reality included a surprising amount of communal bowel movement, questionable hygiene, and fear of explosive sewer gas. Civilization has always been messy, sometimes literally, and we haven't even mentioned the military yet. Roman soldiers were some of the most disciplined, battle-hardened men in history. They built roads, conquered continents, and maintained the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen. But even the mighty legions had to poop, and when they did, things got weird. Out in the field, Roman camps were models of efficiency. Everything had its place. Tents in tidy rows, weapon storage, mess halls, and yes, latrines. The military was obsessed with hygiene, not because they loved cleanliness, but because they hated disease. Soldiers dying from diarrhea wasn't great for morale or conquest. So latrines in Roman forts were dug deep, sometimes lined with wood or stone and strategically placed away from water sources. A trench would be filled with waste and occasionally covered. But when you're marching for days across Gaul, there's no time to dig a deluxe toilet. That's when you get what historians call the ditch-and-go strategy. Find a hole, do your business, move on. But the sponge, oh yes, it followed them. Military tersoriums were a thing. And according to some sources, soldiers were even taught the correct angle for wiping, because discipline doesn't stop at the waistline. Some units, like the elite Praetorian Guard, had access to more permanent facilities in forts and cities. But the average foot soldier, let's just say he got very familiar with nature, and probably with the unfortunate backside of the guy in front of him. Back in Rome, the toilet wasn't just practical, it was political. Public latrines were often funded by wealthy citizens or emperors trying to score points with the people. Vote for me, I gave you a place to poop in peace. In a city of 1 million people, free sanitation was a public service and a campaign strategy. One famous emperor, Vespasian, took this to another level. He implemented a tax on urine. Yes, really. Public urinals collected liquid waste which was then used by tanners and launderers because of its ammonia content. When Vespasian's son complained about the smell of money made from pee, the emperor supposedly held up a coin and said, "Pecunia non olet, money doesn't stink." Spoiler alert, it did. But the legacy stuck. To this day, public urinals in some parts of Europe are called Vespasiani. So congratulations, Vespasian. You're remembered every time someone relieves themselves in a tin box. Now let's return to the average Roman. You're walking through the forum buying some bread, maybe gossiping about gladiator matches. Suddenly nature calls. You spot a public latrine. You walk in, nod to the 2 guys already seated, lift your tunic, and sit. No toilet paper, no door, just eye contact and awkward small talk. You reach for the tersorium, still wet from its last voyage. Try not to think about it. You do your business, you rinse the sponge, you place it back, you leave praying to Cloacina that whatever you just sat on wasn't crawling with something alive. This was daily life, normal, mundane, unremarkable. Yet it tells us more about Roman civilization than all their columns and colosseums combined, because you can learn a lot about a society by how and where they poop. In fact, latrines were places of gossip, of business deals, of jokes. They were deeply human spaces. One archaeologist even called Roman toilets the great equalizer, where rich and poor, powerful and powerless, all sat on the same cold slab and did what needed doing. And yet, despite all their innovations, there's one simple truth the Romans never cracked. No one likes a surprise snake to the butt. There's something strangely poetic about how the Romans treated something so fundamentally human with such structured absurdity. In a civilization obsessed with order ranks and spectacle, even going to the toilet was choreographed a shared ritual of relief and resilience. Let's not forget how toilets made their way into Roman culture and literature. Writers and poets of the time didn't shy away from bathroom humor. Martial, the Roman poet known for his biting satire, wrote entire verses about latrines and those who used them too long. Clearly, the ancient sense of humor wasn't that different from ours. Poop jokes have been funny for over 2,000 years. Even architecture embraced the potty pride. In places like Ostia, the port city of Rome, some of the most lavish buildings featured public latrines with intricate mosaics on the walls and floors. One famous mosaic includes dolphin sea creatures and the Latin phrase cacator cave malum, which loosely translates to pooper, beware of evil. A bit ominous for a bathroom sign, but hey, snakes in the sewers were a real threat. In larger forums or bath complexes, latrines were sometimes built with acoustics in mind. That's right, echo chambers of flatulence. Whether by design or by accident, Roman latrines had excellent sound amplification. You walk in, sit down, and the entire room knows exactly what your digestive system is up to. There was no such thing as subtlety in a Roman restroom. The Romans even developed their own bathroom etiquette. For example, some latrines had no running water, but featured a continuous stream from a nearby fountain to rinse waste away. Users were expected to bring their own sponge if they didn't want to risk using the communal one. It was one of the few cases where BYOS bring your own sponge was not only wise, but life-preserving. Of course, all of this had to be maintained. Enter the fuller's workers, who collected urine for industrial purposes. These poor souls made a living gathering urine from public latrines and selling it to tanners and laundries. Yes, Roman laundry detergent was basically pee. Your toga might have looked white, but it sure didn't smell fresh. And it wasn't just human waste they had to deal with. Latrines were often magnets for pests, rats, insects, and who knows what else. Cleaning these facilities required bravery, endurance, and possibly a strong nose. Slaves or low-ranking workers were assigned the unenviable task of keeping things manageable. Let's just say there were no Employee of the Month plaques in this department. By the late Roman Empire, some of these public toilets had fallen into disrepair, especially in the western provinces. As infrastructure collapsed and cities shrank, grand marble latrines gave way to chamber pots and open defecation. It's strange to think that in some places people were literally going backward from a complex sewer system to tossing it out the window. Ironically, when the so-called Dark Ages rolled in, many of the Roman sanitary advances disappeared for centuries. The knowledge of sewers, latrines, and even basic hygiene was lost or ignored. In medieval Europe, chamber pots were the height of convenience again, and entire cities reeked of human waste. It would take more than 1,000 years for sanitation to catch up to what the Romans had achieved, however flawed it was. And yet, for all its discomfort and potential danger, the Roman toilet was a revolutionary idea, making sanitation public, accessible, and strangely social. They created spaces that, while terrifying by today's standards, represented a giant leap in organized waste management. Today we take things like toilet paper privacy, plumbing, and even flush handles for granted. But behind every modern convenience is a trail of trial and error, and sometimes flaming latrines. So the next time you're annoyed at a public restroom without paper towels, think of Marcus sitting on cold stone, reaching for a damp sponge and praying no snake makes eye contact. Because in the end, the real glory of Rome wasn't just in its emperors or architecture, it was in its brave, bare-bottomed citizens who dared to poop together. And here's where things get delightfully ironic. For all the grandeur of the Roman Empire, the aqueducts, the roads, the colosseums filled with roaring crowds, perhaps its most lasting legacy is the toilet. Not the luxurious kind, but the idea that managing human waste is a shared civic responsibility. In a world where everyone from the emperor to the fishmonger had to answer nature's call, the toilet was the great equalizer. Even urban planning in Rome revolved around waste. Streets were built with raised sidewalks and drainage channels. Apartment buildings had waste chutes, often just holes in the wall that emptied into courtyards or the street. The concept of out of sight, out of mind was alive and well, except in summer when everything was very much in sight and very much in smell. The Cloaca Maxima, the Great Sewer, wasn't just a fancy name. It was one of the earliest and most sophisticated sewer systems in the ancient world. Built to drain the marshy valleys between Rome's hills, it eventually became the backbone of waste management for the entire city. Rainwater, bathwater, kitchen, runoff. And yes, everything that came out of you ended up in this massive underground tunnel. And it's still there today, over 2,000 years later, a monument to the eternal struggle of keeping our cities. Not disgusting. But no system is perfect, especially when you don't fully understand disease. Despite their engineering genius, the Romans didn't know about bacteria or viruses. Latrines and sewers may have made life more convenient, but they also helped spread illness. Typhoid, dysentery parasites all were common companions in the Roman digestive journey. It's no wonder ancient physicians sometimes prescribed staying far, far away from public toilets. And yet there's something deeply human about it all. The jokes carved into bathroom walls, the silent nods exchanged across a marble seat, the humble act of rinsing a sponge with vinegar and wishing for the best. It's messy, it's weird, it's undeniably gross, but it's history. Our ancestors pooped together so we could poop alone. They braved flaming toilets, snake attacks, and communal sponges so we could enjoy the privacy of a porcelain throne with a double-ply safety net. Their awkward eye contact paved the way for our cubicle walls. Their questionable hygiene practices inspired millennia of sanitary improvements. So what do Roman toilets teach us? That even the most powerful civilizations are only as strong as their sewer system. That progress sometimes looks like a public bench with holes in it. And that if you want to understand a society, look at how it handles the things no one wants to talk about. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go thank my bathroom.